Welcome to I See What You Mean, a podcast about how people get on the same page or don't, or perhaps shouldn't. Today my guest is Brenda Blackman. Brenda is a friend and federal government consulting colleague with a career of military and civilian organizational leadership. Brenda, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lou. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Brenda. Why don't we start with a short bio about yourself?
Sure. I served in the Air Force for 28 years.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great career, made many friends, lifelong friends that I still have good relationships with. And in fact, one of my former bosses is the one that introduced me to the consulting world.
Mm-hmm.
So he brought me in as a young consultant into a woman-owned disabled company, which was very close to my heart, being a former military person. And so I've been serving in that capacity for the last 10 years with different companies, leading a team, continuing to use my experience, hopefully, to make things better.
Absolutely. And that was why I wanted to talk with you, because of the experience I know you've had in the military service as a leader. We work together on the civilian side, and I think you're great at what you do, and especially at mentoring young professionals and teaching young professionals some of the ropes. So I want to recall something we talked about when we were preparing, and it actually has to do with some generational differences. You told me a funny story about playing a board game with some family where communication was critical to the game, and you saw that there was a difference in the communication by generations of the participants, of the players. So why don't you recount that story, and we'll start there.
Sure. For those that have not played the game of Code Names, it's a board game with cards and people. You have to have at least 4 people dividing up into 2 teams. So one team is the spy master and the other team are known as the field operatives. So supposedly skill's very important, but what we found out was playing with the young 20-year-olds, and then there were 2 of us that were about 4 decades older than them. The young ones were giving us the clues, and we really, in most cases, kind of had no idea what they were talking about. But as we went through the game, we had the aha moment that it's very important. Age does factor into how you communicate, how you get on the same page. Because again, with their clues, it was very important or very apparent that the other young one was like much later than ours. But if we had paired up by age, we may have done better.
I called the podcast I See What You Mean to capture that aha moment that you mentioned, when you go, oh, I see what you mean. And that flash of insight, or that perspective shift that does something to get 2 or more people on the same page. I know that there are many factors to that. I hadn't thought a great deal about generational factors regarding that. So the game is a fun illustration of that point, but it's an important illustration of that point. So it makes me wonder what there's been work experiences that you've had, we both had, where because of gender or generation, or perhaps culture, or even, Brenda, just professional training. If you put an engineer and a customer service person in a room together, they speak different languages because they have different roles and responsibilities.
Right.
Tell me about some of your experience bridging those gaps in getting people on the same page, how you've helped people see that and then exchange information with each other so that they can have their own aha moments.
Well, some of that comes with, one, always factoring in everyone clearly wants to do a good job. No one comes to work every day to think that they don't want to be successful. But how do you communicate with them to make sure that they know that they're valued? Every human being wants to be recognized, believed in. That kind of leads into mentoring and helping to grow people by valuing what they bring. But it also means that you have to take the extra step and the extra time to make sure that the people you're working with, your team, are as invested in the outcome as you are. And by clearly defining to them what success looks like. How do you get to the successful point?
Right.
And yes, culture, gender, age, all the things that, some of the things we're not supposed to talk about do come into play.
Yeah.
But again, as you say, taking a more mature adult that has had a successful career and leading hundreds and hundreds of people in charge of millions of dollars programs into a small team of 30, 40, or 50. But success for an individual shouldn't be defined on how many people you lead or how many accolades you've had. It's still, you've got to be hungry for that next success. But success is not defined by you as an individual.
Right.
It is a team.
Right.
And the more you can engage that team and help them to understand what success means, then the more vested they will be. And if we're not clearly communicating or making sure we set the stage to make sure we're all on the same page, then the less likely, whether it's work or personally,
doesn't matter,
that we'll be successful.
Good point. And I want to take a half step back, but then come right back to where you just left it, because I'm going to connect a couple things. I didn't serve in the military, and I probably misunderstood the command and control nature of the military. Before I worked with you and others pretty closely, I might have thought the ability of someone in the military to issue an order was how things were communicated and how things worked. And they could be. But I think that I had a conversation with Bob Nunley once about that, and his answer was funny, and you'll laugh. He said, apart from a crisis or urgent situation, a combat where an order is the right way to communicate something, he said, and his voice went like this, it's the worst way to communicate with people, right? I tie it in my mind to what you just said, and I want to ask you to confirm it or explain it to me. You can issue an order. You're in a civilian on a team at work. If you're the project manager, if you're an executive in a company, you can issue an order. That doesn't mean people understand enough about it to get on the same page. That doesn't mean they know enough about what you're looking for to bring their best to it. So comment for a moment, if you would, about the idea of issuing orders and a different way to have a conversation about it to start things off.
So, and I'll take it a different way of, I like to look at it as commander's intent. So, and it's understood that it's an order. I give you a direct order to do something. That means you have no other choice. And as Bob said, that's not a good way to operate. There are times when you have to say that, but those are very dire situations. It's usually, again, and I have folks that'll say it now because they've been around me and Bob for long enough. They go, okay, we just want to make sure we have got commander's intent. And that is, do we understand what the ask is? And so sometimes the way to make sure they understand is you say it back to me. I need this deliverable. Can you explain to me how you're going to give that to me? So the commander's intent is that deliverable in 5 days, making sure everyone understands what that is. Set the stage. How will we get there? How do we unprioritize something else that's hot right now to get to that? So we look at it as, at the end of the day, yes, it may be an order, but it's the intent of the ask. And that was one of the challenges I had when I transitioned out of the service and into the civilian sector, that I thought because I asked for it, it was going to be done. But it wasn't always managed that way. And I didn't want to have to say, well, that's an order, because they'd go, well, okay, whatever. But it was, you wanted them to, again, feel that they understood, they knew why. You had the opportunity to say why. Sometimes you don't have the opportunity to explain why you need it.
Well, to say more about the intent having to do with understanding means and ends, I think there's something about intent and the idea in commander's intent of understanding what is to be done. If I'm walking away from a conversation, I know what I need to go do. We know what we need to go do. But there's something about understanding why what we do is understanding what we do as a means to an end that I think helps people perform. Say, what's your experience with that?
At one point, yes, I had a boss that didn't believe in explaining why. He always just said, you have this piece of the pie to work. And it was always hard to understand how what you were contributing fit into the big picture. So as long as I had the opportunity to say to the people that work for me now, so how to make people feel empowered. And that's the, one of the big buzzwords is empower people to be successful, empower people to know that they can do their job. And sometimes that's all they need is that positive influence of we've got confidence in them. I have a very young group of people right now about to lead a big project. They're stepping into the role of the senior PM, and it's huge. But I have no doubt they're going to be successful because they've shown that they're hungry. They've shown that they can deliver. They're a younger version of your daughter that, you see that spark in them that all they need is just someone that believes in them. Not that your daughter didn't have many people that believed in her.
No, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
I had the pleasure of helping to guide and groom her, and most people take that very seriously because at the end of the day, they're the next generation. They're going to be the next PM. They are going to be the next vice president of a company.
That's right.
So you invest in them and you have confidence in them and you help them understand, but you make it a two-way street that they feel open to come back and say, do you have a minute?
Right.
And sometimes you don't, sometimes you do, but you always want to find that minute because for them, that's important.
Well, I think it is important. And I think if I were given an order and I had to have no more information, I could go off and do what I was told to do. I could turn it back on time and on schedule and on budget and the best quality I could deliver to, let's say to you, Brenda, that I could in the time. I just have to, if what I was given was scoped that narrowly, the order is go do this, go do this analysis or go find this information, whatever it is. I have to trust that when I bring it back, you or someone else is piecing the other pieces with it. Now, that might or might not work well for you, but if that's how we communicated, that's all I can do. I would rather know why, not because I want to challenge it. I'd rather know why you needed that piece from me and how it related to some other pieces, because it also might help me do my job a little bit better to get you back something that's more useful. Or in the process, if we had a day or had a week, communicate with some of the other colleagues on the task. Make sure we're coordinated. Make sure we're on the same page, so you don't get back things that are sloppy or messy or disconnected that you had to fix. I think knowing something about the rationale, and I understand commander's intent, is also provides the rationale, like you said, not just a command, not just an order, but the rationale, because then it also engages the people who receive it. It engages their brains in a different way.
Right.
And I think that goes to what you said, your comment that you closed a moment ago, that it's important for people to feel like they're bringing value to what they're doing. Being thinking beings, not just cogs and not just doing, but thinking and catching things. To be able to engage at that level is, I think, more rewarding for people, and I think improves performance. I mean, you tell me what your experience is, but I think it improves performance. And I think it brings people together in a way, Brenda, that they learn to do that together. So the next time, they'll keep building that skill of a high-functioning team.
Agree. There have been, opportunities, very frustrating opportunities, where you weren't sure that you had commander's intent or that the commander knew what they were asking for.
Sure.
And so you got the perception of, okay, bring me a rock. And we go, okay, we're going to polish that rock and we're going to bring that rock. And we bring that rock and he's like, or she's like, well, it's not quite what I had in mind.
Right.
So that is just a huge challenge when you go back and forth, and you finally go, okay, the words that you will never hear out of my mouth are, I give up. I do not know what you want. Do you really know what you want? And that's always the challenge of saying, do you really know? And sometimes it's not. But again, the joke is, okay, go polish your rock and bring me another rock.
That's right.
Well, it's still not the rock we want. So that is what I try to always avoid. I know it's human nature because you sometimes have in your mind exactly what you want, but you fail to communicate and to make sure that the person you're communicating with is on the same page. You have not in some way developed that thought, or the thought may not be totally complete yet
Right,
to be
right.
able to deliver it. And you'll know it when I see it. Oh, those are words that I don't like to
Oh, yeah, that's
hear.
bad.
Yeah, that's such a
That's
waste of time.
that's bad.
But yes, I'll know it when I see it. I
Do you?
try never to say that.
No, 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 no. That's no. It's my obligation to figure it out a little bit more before I ask you to go do it. Have you seen a difference in, let's say, capability maturity, not of individuals, but of organizations or of teams, of leadership between the military and civilian in the way that in the thing that we're talking about, where let's just say it's effective communication.
Yes, I'm sure it is there because, again, when you think about when we retire from the military, we all say, the first question you're asked is, do you miss it?
Uh,
And probably every person, bar none, will say, I don't miss the work, but I miss the
the
people.
people, yeah,
The people that come together, you are comrades in arms
yeah,
for the rest of your life
uh huh,
because you've lived through like experiences.
uh
You've
huh,
been stationed overseas, that your military family becomes your family
uh huh.
because you
You're
don't have
right,
access to your family.
right, right.
And so you can communicate. You can go for years and not see each other and sit down over, some
Mm-hmm.
mimosas and some brunch. And 5 hours later, time just disappears. Whereas in the civilian sector, you don't have that
Right,
because people change jobs, people go home to their
right,
families,
right.
which is different. So as a former military person, I had to make that mental transition that doesn't mean that they're not vested in the job. It's just a different way of thinking. And one of my young folks, I always say, I try to find a way to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm asked for something, and if the time comes that I have to say no, then my client knows there's something catastrophic there that we can't support it.
Right, right.
So communicating the importance of saying yes without it being illegal, immoral, or
Right, right,
threatening,
right,
as they
right, right.
say. It's a way of kind of cooperating to graduate and just getting along and trying to take that culture through my team to make sure that, again, it's not my success, it's our success, and it's our failure if it comes to that.
Sure. I think I might be mistaken or maybe making it oversimplification, but I think that to me the military practice of the kinds of things you and I are talking about were more deliberate. They were more
Yes,
intentional. Not that they
yes,
can't be in the civilian sector, but I think there was something about training in the military that led to that intentional, deliberate practice, like a best practice. Here's
right.
how we do things. And in the civilian side, there maybe isn't so much of that training generally. It could be in any company, it could be with any leader, but it isn't that way, I don't think, generally.
Yes, in the military, we train and equip because unfortunately, people's lives
Right, right,
could be at stake.
right,
And most opportunities in the civilian side of consulting, I won't say all civilian
right,
opportunities, but
right.
in consulting, a mistake or lack of
You could,
communication is not going to cause something
we can
catastrophic to happen.
recover from it, yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
Correct.
So you're getting on the same page with your team. When you are getting on the same page with them and you're getting them on the same page with each other and you, how do you define that? What's happening when people are on the same page? I think we've implied what it means by this, by what we've talked about so far. But do you have when you see it happening and you know it's happening, what are you seeing?
I see people that, one, we've had a chance to communicate what the ask is,
Mm-hmm.
what the expected outcome is.
Mm-hmm.
We get in sync, we get on the same page. I provide the intent. I come back and allow them the chance to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
But it's no different when the client asks me for
Right.
something
Right.
to go hire someone. What do they need to have? What experience do they need
The
to have?
questions
So
you
it's
have. Right. Right.
yeah, it's always the back and forth communication to make sure I understand. There is also, and I have a young consultant that has been worked for me now for probably 8 years.
Hmm.
He's very good at understanding the commander's intent. Most times I can say to him, this is what I need. He's right on it,
Mm-hmm.
and he delivers every time. So that's another thread there, that based on who you're familiar with and comfortable with,
Right.
sometimes you tend to go back to them. As Bob said, when you get to the point where you're in charge, you have that little black book and you bring people around, not people that make you feel good,
No,
but
but you
people that
work well with. Yeah.
understand
Yeah.
how you
Yeah.
work. I had 3 jobs in my career that I followed someone around because he's like, okay, go get that person. That
Right.
person, I
Right.
can speak and they understand.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you don't have the time to stop and explain what the intent is,
Right.
because lack of communication leaves that person out there delivering that rock that may or may not be what you want. So it's imperative, as a supervisor, as a manager, that you communicate to them and make sure, and you do the interim check-ins. It's something
Right.
that familiar for them, that they are making sure that the door is open, the communication is there. Open door is always the most important way to make sure we're clearly communicating.
There's something important. There's something to two people, like you described, sort of being on the same page with each other in a general way. That they read each other's minds, or they understand each other, so they work well together. There's something about that that has to do with the ability to make predictions. We don't often talk about it that way, but I've been reading about this and thinking about this, and I was thinking about examples of, like, so I'm in Tampa. Tom Brady comes down from New England after a career, and he's with new receivers in Tampa. Everyone's saying that he and the receivers have to learn to get on the same page. They got to learn to be in sync. Not like guys that he played with for 2, 3, 4, or 10 or more years. And then Gronkowski joins him, and the comparison was those two read each other's minds, and the other receivers were learning how. Well, they don't really read minds. What you do is you know what someone's going to do in a situation. So if Brady's dropped back to pass and he sees the field that Gronkowski's in, he sees space between Gronkowski and a defender. He knows where Gronkowski is going to run, but maybe he knows he won't make that move and go in that direction because there's no space there. He knows he's going to do, or he can predict with some probability, what he'll do differently. And it looks like they're reading each other's minds, but really what they've done is played together so much they know how each other is going to operate in a certain situation. Now, if you've not thrown a ball to a receiver ever before, you don't know that about them. They don't know that about you as a quarterback. They, the receiver, don't know what the quarterback would be thinking as the play unfolds. And it unfolds in a couple seconds, in a few seconds. I think in the work world, where you and Bob or you and others have worked well together, you knew that once the conversation was over, and like you said, it continues, but it's over for the time, and you're off to do things, and you are leading others in a lot of activity. As things come up, as circumstances evolve, I think you've got some knowledge about what Bob would hope is done, or anybody, any commander. I'm thinking of someone in particular because we work together. What someone hopes would be done under a set of circumstances. Or if you handled it in a certain way and explained why you handled it that way, they'd go, oh, okay, I get it. Right? There's that knowledge with each other of,
Right.
You're always working, to me, you're always working means and ends to get to the outcome. And means and ends can change. Interim means and ends can change on us all the time. But when you piece it together to get to the commander's intent, I know how Brenda will go about this. And even as things come up, I know she's going to, there's a problem person, there's a problem situation, there's a problem with the budget or the schedule change. I can think of what she'll do without having to talk to her. There's a little bit of a prediction going on when people can work well together in the way that you described, and they're kind of on the same page with that knowledge of each other of, I know what they're likely to do, and that's what I would need them to do. Have you ever thought about it that way?
Haven't thought about it that way, but I totally agree. And that's why when I talk about an environmental scan, it's
Mm-hmm.
important that we are helping
Mm-hmm.
people to realize how to do that. Not that I'm right and you're wrong,
Right.
but respectful enough that says, okay, she knows this space. Let's hear what she has to say about this space, this client, this stakeholder, this commander, this situation. And it has a little to do with age, but not totally everything to do.
Right,
It's
right,
experience,
right,
and it's deference to someone has done this before, because I'm a firm believer in, let's not create something just to create it. Let's check our brothers and sisters to see, have you created something like this? Have you
right,
had this
right,
situation?
right.
So it's shared experiences, whether it's within our team, within our company, or within our networks. And that's one of the biggest things that I had to do. And I kept going, I go back to Bob. He was my seeing eye dog. I had a situation. It's like, okay, so he would make that translation of, okay, remember when you did it this and we did it this way? This is what they're asking for. So it's like, it's
Ah,
that
yeah.
aha moment of,
Yeah,
okay, that's what
yeah,
it means.
yeah.
So it's the communication of a different type of acronym, a different type of
Right,
deliverable.
right,
But again, bringing that brand new person in, or bringing, that right out of college, or bringing that
right.
person new to the team, making them feel part of the family, part of the team, and having the same interest in success as everyone else does, whether it's been someone that has been with me for 8 years,
Or
someone that's
not.
been with
Right,
me for 8 days.
right,
It's the
right.
same.
I've used a something of a working definition of getting on the same page here on the podcast, which is pretty simple: agreeing enough to take the next step together. And I think that leaves some things out that it can mean to be on the same page. But I was trying to get something. I was trying to get the concept down, the definition down to something very granular. I was trying to get away from the notion that getting on the same page means always means agreement, because it doesn't. If you and I had different ideas, if we were looking at a situation, Brenda, and we saw different things in it and had different ideas of what was going on and what might be done about it, we could agree to take some next steps together to even test our own separate hypotheses about the situation and come back to share with each other what we learned. So,
Because there's different ways to getting on the same page.
okay, good point.
So that, I think for me, that's important in hearing what someone has to offer is, are we on the same page? Yes. How we got there may be different than what I expected.
Right, right.
So being open to that is always a growth opportunity for me, that I've listened, and at the end of the day, we're there. We
Especially especially in a task that's got some complexity to it or some novelty to it, something that's it's not something we've done 100 times. We a team, so that you would expect to be some amount of individual and team learning. Like we're going to operate in the environment. We're going to see what happens. This is the situational. I mean, so the environmental scan notion too. We're operating in the environment. We impact the environment. The environment's impacting us. Are we noticing those cause and effects? Are we noticing what's happening? And are we using that? Are we bringing that information back to each other to process it, to kind of chew on it together and say, well, then in that case, we better try, right? Isn't that what you're thinking of with environmental scan, or one of the things you're thinking
Yes.
of?
Right. And we all have to go through that storming and norming phases, those
Mm-hmm.
storming and norming phases, to get to the end game.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, unless we've worked with everyone our whole life,
Right, right,
it's
right.
it's going to be a little bit of storming and norming each time.
So I'm trying as I launch this practice, and it's going to be a little bit more coaching than consulting, but in a way, in a particular way, about a leader with a team in a situation. So there's some situation they're facing where they need to be on the same page, and the communication, some communication techniques to help them do that quickly. And it's built on this notion that we each of us sees something a little bit different in a situation. That might be because of gender or not. It could be because of generation, experience, and sort of or not. It could be because of our training. I mean, I mentioned before, in a situation, let's say it's a business situation, one I'm more familiar with than military situations, somebody responsible for the budget and the funding will see certain things in a situation differently than what someone responsible for the IT or some other technical aspects of the situation, that different than someone who understands the customer in a really intimate way. People see different things in a situation and make different things of them, of what they see. to decide what they think should be done as a means to the end of accomplishing something. But what each of us is doing, at least initially, is lining all that up for our own with our own knowledge and space, the space we're in, the subject matter expertise we have, or the role in the team we have. What we're also talking about is doing that at a step up at a team level. Not just 4 or 6 or 8 people doing it individually, but bringing that together as a team. That's where we're building some shared knowledge. So if we share different pieces of the puzzle or the pie together to put a picture together that looks like it makes sense to the team, I think it changes each individual's understanding of the situation. It even could be people could get passionate about some things at times, right? Right.
Right.
And we can take that as a good sign that they care about what they care about this. But we got to teach people to work through it in a way that they have some aha moments along the way. They go, okay, now I'm broadening my lens. I'm broadening my individual perspective, building a team knowledge of something. So, but sorry, I wandered afield a bit. I wanted to share with you to get your reaction. I have this notion of we see different things to a degree, we size them up in different ways, and we think we would do something differently as a means to an end of accomplishing something, and that doesn't all automatically line up across a team. We got to work to get that to line up.
Right, because we're individuals first, working to being a team. We each come with our different baggage, experience, thoughts, again, whether it's culture,
Wherever it comes from,
experience, or
right,
whatever.
right.
But there's always someone or something that threads that needle through it all to get to the end point of a successful delivery, successful mission, whatever that happens to be. There's always got to be either an informed leader or someone else that's pulling that thread through to make sure that everyone knows they're being heard and understands what they're bringing to the table.
That's a good point too. Somebody who can guide that process along. I think what happens. I love this when it happens. You see individuals on that, like you said, we're individuals first. We're sort of on our own pages first, creating a same page that we're getting on. What I love about that process is when people share observations, insights, and something new or novel emerges out of it. It wasn't something that any particular individual on the team was already thinking. Some new insight, some new observation, a new hypothesis, a new something emerges from the conversation. It wasn't Lewis saying, hey, I think it's black with white stripes, and then at the end everybody goes, wow, it's black with white stripes. No, some people thought it was white with black stripes, some people thought it was other things, but as we talk, somewhere along the line someone goes, and maybe it's the leader who goes, hey, wait a minute, what if?
Yeah.
What about, hey, what if we thought about it this way? And there can be that aha moment. Tell me about you seeing teams do that, or how you've helped teams do that, where you pull that thread along and then something new comes of it that truly is a team result. That wasn't any individual, like you used the pie example. All you put the ingredients together, they're all separate ingredients, and then out comes something different.
Right. Well, that comes from, again, commitment from the team individuals, bringing their best foot forward and being professional and willing enough to see that there's more than one way
Right.
of seeing things.
Right.
That we can't be convinced that we have the right and only answer, because there may be a different approach to getting to the end game of being a professional, making a delivery, but yet we've missed the mark on what the expectation is. So by being willing to practice your briefing, by being able to get there early, which again was a different culture for some of the folks that I was leading.
Yeah.
You've got to be prepared to come across as being informed, and you've got to be prepared to be the expert. So if you haven't done your preparation, then you're not going to be successful on the other end. So if you're not there, you don't have your Sierra together, you're not making a professional appearance, which again, it's not all about how you look, but if you don't come prepared and look the part, then you're not going to convince someone of what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So by setting up some small practices like that of doing some dry runs, doing some practices, making sure we're dressed appropriately, making sure we're early, has helped to lead the team to a different mindset. Simple things to help guide them into not necessarily my definition of success, but what I've seen that has been successful in the past. And the person we're delivering to, I know it won't be lost on him that
Right.
we are prepared, we look the part, we can provide the story successfully,
Right.
and have the credibility that we need
Right.
as we come to the table.
Well, I like what you said about, and it's a challenge though. I like what you said about you can't believe you have the whole answer yourself, but sometimes we do.
Right.
Or maybe we really don't believe we have the whole answer ourselves, but maybe someone feels so passionate about what they know they would concede as a piece of something larger. Often when they're not being heard, or they don't feel like they're being heard, they keep getting louder, or they keep getting more insistent, or they look like they're digging in their heels.
Right.
They haven't had that feeling yet of, if you're not heard, you can feel like you keep beating that, you want to beat that same drum to be heard.
And one of the aha moments I had is some of our young consultants aren't taught to see that. They're
That's
so
right.
invested in the answer that they've worked so hard to get to that they can't see that, not even necessarily talking louder, but just saying it again and
Again and again, right.
They've missed the point. So another practice that we have is, if you're delivering or you're briefing, it's like we sit and dry run it and murder board it, as we would say in the military, and teach you how to speak John or how to speak Jane. What are they looking for? What are they
What are they going to be
How are they
right.
going to do it
Right.
chronologically? And if you got a number wrong, you just lost your credibility. So how do you recover from that?
Right.
How do you almost laugh at yourself?
Yeah.
In a very respectful way,
right.
Not to get embarrassed and totally shut down.
Right.
That's like so important.
That's a great point. And that's also that leader helping, teaching, pulling that thread, helping the team learn to do that. I think once people have done it once or twice, I think it's a very distinctive experience. Right. When we've been part of a team that worked well together, that's a wow experience. And behaviors that we exhibit in contributing to that as a means to the end of that, I think are very highly positively reinforced. Like, I want to do that again. Yeah. I like how that felt. I wish I could work that way all the time. And we know that not every team does, but boy, that becomes the gold standard. We're always striving for, if you're a team member, you're always hoping of the next task or the next project, I want it to go like that. If you're the team leader or in a leadership position, that's what we're trying to create for people all the time. It doesn't always work, but that's, I think, what we aim for.
Right. And it's, you got to learn when to pay it forward. And someone has helped you be successful.
Yeah.
So how are you helping the next person be successful? How are you making them feel like they are valued and they have something to bring to the table? Very, very important.
Well, yeah.
Blessed with mentors in my past. I try to pay that same thing forward. And, when someone says, you're great, I go, oh, thank you very much. But if that means something to you, then you go do it for someone else. And so helping someone else succeed, whether it's an individual or a team, right, is so important.
Well, and we should probably wrap up here because we could dig into this for a whole discussion in itself. I certainly think a difference between the military as a profession of leaders and teams and the civilian world is the military, I think, is very intentional about succession planning and about preparing the next person for a role or paying things forward in the way. Every individual in the military? No, that's just human nature. No. Are there some maybe selfish or narrow-minded folks everywhere yeah, but I think the military has a practice that says we bring people up because they're going to become the leaders or because we're rotating out and people have to be ready to continue this responsibility, task, project, piece of the mission, whatever it is. And it'd be the failure of a leader if they left and people behind them weren't ready. In the civilian world, I don't think there is that much of a mindset of succession planning, and maybe partly because people could stay in positions for long periods of time. They don't rotate out. They don't go to another assignment. There isn't the need to keep preparing people behind you. But I think what you said about the value you place on paying it forward, there's no downside to that. That's something we would hope to all do all the time. But I think it might be more exceptional in the civilian world. What do you think? Put you on the spot. What do you think? I know you try to do it.
I do, because again, it's all about making the place you leave a better place,
Yeah.
and making sure you're preparing someone to step into your role, because
Well,
sooner or later we are
someone's
all
going
going
to,
to step
right.
out of those roles. Yes.
Well, and look,
and if you haven't set someone up
Yeah.
for success, then all your hard work won't go away, but it will certainly suffer in the short term until everyone gets back on the same page with that new person.
Well, and look, here's the truth, and we can close with this. Tasks come and go, projects come and go, budgets come and go, right? Those things come and go. In the end, it's the people who came together because people are so committed in their hearts and souls, in their DNA, to a cause. It's very powerful to be a part of that. It is the people that often matter the most. Well,
I agree.
We've got to get you on to your next activity. I thank you very much for spending this time with me. I enjoyed it and learned a lot, like I always do when we talk.
It's my pleasure, Lou. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you, Lou. Appreciate it.
Have a good
Chat
day.
soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's how we see it, my friends. I want to thank Brenda for recording today's episode. You can find it at iseewhatyoummean.castos.com, plus all the usual places. Send questions and suggestions through the app. Subscribe and give me a 5-star rating unless you can't, in which case tell me why. And join me next week when we take another look at how to get on the same page and stay there, unless we shouldn't.